Okay, number 10 on summary review number 1. Again, another complex fraction. And again, we've got radicals in the denominator. So 4 times the square root of x, so that's the only denominator I have, so that's my LCD. So I multiply the top and bottom by 4 times the square root of x. And here I've got 4, square root of x times the square root of x is x, and this is just canceled, so it becomes 1. And again, like in the last problem, number 9, 4 and the square root of x times the square root of x is x, so I got 4x. And again, we just wrote this as two fractions, 4x over 4x minus 1 over 4x. And that's just 1 over 1 minus 1 over 4x. And again, x has got to be greater than 0 because we can't have a 0 in the denominator, and we cannot have a negative number under the radical, so that's not too bad. Let's take a look at number 11. And again, we have a radical in the denominator, just one denominator in the numerator, x squared plus 2. So that's not too bad, so that's my LCD. So I multiply the top and the bottom by the square root of x squared plus 2. So that was my only denominator, the square root of x squared plus 2, so that's my LCD, so I'll multiply the top and the bottom by that. And when I multiply the first term, these cancel, so I just have x squared. And you may think this is going to be a little bit more complicated, but now don't forget this minus sign, be careful on that. But I have a negative, and when I multiply the square root of x squared plus 2 times the square root of x squared plus 2, what do I get? Just x squared plus 2. But don't forget to enclose that by a parentheses because you've got a negative sign on this whole second part of this numerator. That means both terms will be affected by that negative sign. That's a common mistake made in Algebra 1. We don't want to make those mistakes. And in the bottom, basically we just have x squared times x squared plus 2. And then I would remove this parentheses, so x squared and minus x squared minus 2 all over the LC, or all over this denominator, x squared times the square root of x squared plus 2. The x squared is canceled, so I've got the negative 2. So we just leave that in the numerator, and we've got this. Now the restrictions on the domain, well, we know x can't be 0. All right? So that was one domain, and then we don't have to worry about this denominator being 0 or negative because x squared will always be positive. So the smallest, it can't be 0, so this will always be positive. So that's the only problem. X cannot equal 0. So that wasn't too bad. Okay, let's take a look at number 12. And it's very similar to number 11. Again, one fraction in the denominator. That's the square root of 5 minus x squared. So that's my LCD, so I'll multiply the top and the bottom by that. The square root of 5 minus x squared. And again, in the first term, I just have 5 minus x squared because the square roots kind of take care of each other. And then these cancel, so I just have x squared. And the bottom, now I'm kind of stuck with this. So I've got 5 minus x squared times the square root of 5 minus x squared. Now, in order to simplify this, we can really think of this as this. The reason why is we can kind of combine these. In other words, this is the same. If you take the square root of 5 minus x squared, you get 5 minus the square root. You just get 5 minus x squared. But the reason why we can do this is because we can put these both under the radical, and we can write this as the square root of 5 minus x squared cubed, because I've got squared and first power. So that's a way of simplifying it. Here the x squareds cancel, so I just have 5 in the numerator. So it's kind of a tricky way to simplify it. And lots of times they do that. You'll find your answers from a calculus problem are in one form algebraically, and then the book puts them in a different form. So you really learn your algebra by manipulating the form your answer is in to the form that the book solution is in. Now, again, we have to make sure that since we're taking the square root, this is not 0. Because, well, first of all, we don't want the square root of 0 is 0, so we don't want 5 minus x squared to be 0. And we don't want it to be negative because we can't take the square root of a negative number. So we can just say 5 minus x squared is greater than 0. So we can put this x squared on the other side and then flip them. So we would say that x squared is less than 5, or x is, between plus or minus the square root of 5. I guess that would work. So x squared is less than 5. That's a good restriction on the domain. Okay. And number 13. Now we see this a lot. X plus h. When we get into derivatives, we use this kind of form a lot. What we call quotient differences. So you'll see those a little bit later. So again, we have a complex fraction. We have a lot of letters. We've got two denominators, the square root of x plus h and the square root of x. Again, we don't have any common factors, so we don't get much relief. So there's your LCD, just the product of those two denominators, x plus h. So multiply the top and the bottom of the fraction by the LCD. Now, nothing's going to help much in the denominator, so it's just going to be h times the square root of x times the square root of x plus h. The first term, the square root of x plus h is cancel, so I've got 1 times the square root of x. And in the second term, the square root of x is cancel, and I've got negative that. And basically, there's not much I can do. I can't add these or simplify these or combine them, so basically you're done. So you just have to worry about the restrictions on the domain. I don't know if these were in the book as such, but I kind of figured them out just to be consistent. So we have h in the bottom, so h can't be 0. X can't equal to 0, can't be 0 because I'd have the square root of 0, which is 0. And then this cannot be 0. So x plus h is, and that can't be negative. So x plus h must be greater than 0. And then if you subtract, you get x is greater than negative h. So those are the restrictions on the domain. Maybe this one was in the answer. I know some of the other ones weren't. For some reason, they stopped putting the restrictions on the domain in the answer, so I didn't copy them down. But I think I might have figured them out anyway. Okay? So that's number 13. All right. And I guess that's it. Hope that helps.